So how do we decide what sort of a structure would be applicable to our story? As you prepare to bring your story to life, start by reviewing all the notes that you have taken on the subject. One thing I spoke about some time back when we were discussing about the process of news writing is how note gathering or note making plays a very significant role while you are out there in the field and trying to collect information. Later on you would go on to collate those information. Now when you have the notes or when you have all the information that you have you know gathered from the field, the next thing would be to review this, review all the notes and then decide on the structure of the story as to how you want to go about it. So then think about the ways it can be presented to your audience, because you are not doing that story for yourself, you are writing it primarily for the readers or the viewers or listeners, depending on whatever medium you have chosen to put your story out there. So does it make more sense to present the information in a chronological order, which would be explaining events from the beginning to end? Or does the retelling seems best to fit in the hourglass or inverted pyramid or the narrative format? So primarily these are the structures that you would choose either of them and then proceed in terms of telling your story. So the most popular writing format for news writing is called the inverted pyramid structure, something that you would have come across in the other class taken by Arpita ma'am. Nevertheless, so this is what is inverted pyramid. We'll have to look at it. Then this is the arrangement of information that appears in a descending order of importance. Remember, when you are dealing with news stories, two things I told earlier would be important. One would be space when you are looking at newspapers or magazines, or maybe the web space, or when you are doing television stories or you're doing radio news stories, then at that point in time, the primacy is given to air time. So in both uh, the medium that you are talking about, in whether it is print medium or broadcast medium, broadly, if you categorize it into three, one would be print medium, one would be broadcast medium, and then there is the new media where it's a convergence of both broadcast as well as print media matter. So in such sort of things, one thing that you are constantly facing as a challenge is the time and space crunch. So there, your job is to put out information which is extremely relevant. This is where inverted pyramid structure comes extremely handy. So what we do is we tend to proceed with organization of the information. So the first step in writing your news article is to get yourself organized. Start by reviewing the notes that you have taken on the subject, then decide what information you think is the most important in the process of retelling the story. Okay, who are the most valuable resources? What is the focal point of information? Once you are done with that organizational process, then you have some sort of a direction in terms of your article. You can have one or two starts before determining what fits the best. So many times this is what happens. You take up one structure, get started with putting the information, then you might decide, okay, maybe this format is not best suited to tell the story. Some other structures can be explored. Remember to use the 5 Ws, and this could help you frame the information because you already have the information. Now only thing is to identify what are the factors that will help you frame the story, and this is where the 5 Ws come into picture. How do you want the article to end? You have to know where you want to end up whenever you set out on a journey, and it is no different in the writing process. You might want to jot down a rudimentary outline to work upon or work from. What would be a rudimentary outline? A rudimentary outline would be a rough structure um, that gives you some sort of a direction in doing that story or telling that story. An outline is something that explains where you want to go with the story and what information you want to include it. And this is across formats, irrespective of whether you are doing a news story or you are doing a feature or you are writing a book, novel, an article, whatever you want to do or like to do at that point in time, an outline becomes extremely crucial or necessary. This outline can be used to drive more stories on the subject, perhaps focusing on one or two points, such as who is involved in the task force, if you are doing a textual story, why the sources refuse to be named, and how long illegal dumping has been going on. If we have to talk about a story related to this, these are the examples that I've picked here and there so as to give you some sort of an illustration around that. So it's up to you as a journalist to decide the direction of the story, what its focus will be, and then what information is the most relevant information that you put out, you want to put out for the readers, viewers, listeners, or so you want to take it forward. As the journalist, you should be able to cite the beginning, middle, and end, and then add details to fill the story. So this is where the outline comes to picture, that it helps you guide in deciding the breakup or deciding the breakdown of the story, that you have a beginning of the story, you have a middle of the story, and then you have an end of the story. Then you start filling in the relevant information in the beginning part, in the middle part, or in the end part. There are conflicting opinions about whether or not to include all the pertinent information early in the article. It's something that has been debated over a period of time. Some experts believe that writers should hold back some facts till the later part of the news story, so the readers will complete the article, not navigate away to another story because they have got some nugget of information that is relevant to that particular topic, while others remind the writers that they are not engaged in the art of fiction, and holding back mysterious details is not the stuff of news writing. So this again is class of school of thoughts of journalists. Some people who follow the narrative style, they would try to bring in information or mastering information in the beginning, and the
Sir,
later part you would find in um, yeah. Please go ahead.
sir, is it possible for you to let Ronit in? He said there was no electricity in his place.
Uh, okay, what do I say? Wait, hang on. He's not even here,
Oh, okay, I'll let him know, sir.
and I was recording the session. All right. No, what else? Anyway, ask him to join me. Just let him in.
Yes.
So this is where I was. So this is a class of thoughts, between two set of journalists or group of journalists, um, because you might not be able to carry forward all the information in the first go itself, and there what would happen is, if you are holding on information, then people are also missing out on information, so you have to decide what works best for you and your writing style, and that is something that you do a little later into your career. In the beginning, when you are starting out, you might not have too much of scope to choose. So if you are doing city-based news stories, you have to go out and follow inverted pyramid as a structure most of the times, and because that's something that fits the news cycle in the best possible way, especially when we are doing stories for newspapers or you are doing stories for radio or television. When you have a scope to explore the other structures and the other formats, when you are doing stories for magazines, or you have scope to do longer stories. So there is simply no right or wrong answers in the issue. Keep that in mind, that the news writing requires short paragraphs that contain single idea in each. So if you are doing 3 paragraph story, each paragraph would have information that you navigate through, and that will help you collate the story in the best possible way. So while you are engaged in factual recounting, and informing the public without bogging them down with necessary opinions and details. Also keep all the informations on the subject together. Don't jump around from one to another without creating a thread. Understand your story is like this this one piece. So unless the pieces are tied together, it won't come up as one interesting um, account of that narrative or that event that you want to put forward. So, in other words, strive for clarity in everything that you write. So, each sentence matters, each word that you're putting forward must have some sort of a relevance or the other. Don't use words which doesn't sound relevant, or many a times this is something that people encounter, especially when you are beginning to write. We try to showcase whatever we have is what happens in most cases, that okay, I know so much, so I want to put all those things together. Many times people um, write in a very literary language, but there is a difference between literary language and the journalistic language. Journalistic language follows a style sheet or a particular style document that is followed by your organization, be it a print media, newspaper, or a magazine publication. So they have those things. So try to do that. Try to bring in that amount of clarity while you're putting them together. Remember one thing, that your job would primarily be to um, your job would primarily be to inform people. Your job is not to create an entertainment piece or a piece which would keep people engaged. Your job is to inform people. That is primary reason why you are engaging in journalism. So while doing so, it would be your prerogative to, see to it that each piece of sentence that you're putting forward is clear and concise enough. The readers are not going to stick to a story, nor a publisher with a journalist. If they cannot compose their thoughts clearly and in a straightforward manner, what would happen? Eventually, you will start losing readers. The reading public has an expectation of the news. Remember, readers do not pick up a newspaper or other form of journalism to be engaged for long periods of time. The entire point of news writing is to be informative and concise. Things that I had been reiterating for quite some point of time, and I'm sure in the other writing and editing for print media classes, you would also be told about the same thing, or same reiterations would have happened, that whenever you are doing journalism, job is to engage people in information um, sharing than engage them in other longer formats of consumption. So you should be able to decide which structure you use to write any type of article you are assigned in your career. Okay, whenever you are asked to write, and this is purely from a reporting point of view or from a writing point of view. Eventually, when you turn into an editor, you would also realize when there are other people who are working under you, you'd also know that they are asked to um, follow the same pattern or same structure that you have been doing for that period of time. And that it doesn't really matter um, whether your medium is newspaper or magazine, or your medium is radio or television or new media. And there is usually a space crunch because people want to put as much advertisements as they can, squeeze in wherever possible. So the formats will examine where you want to take your story forward. So what we are going to look at is, whenever we are talking about structures, are largely inverted pyramid, the narrative format or the narrative structure, the hourglass structure, and the chronological order pattern. So first one would be inverted pyramid. The inverted pyramid as a journalistic style of writing is said to be traced back to the Civil War in this country. In this country means it's largely referential to um, the US. So when writers were attempting to telegraph their stories to people, they needed to know the status of the battle. It was common for soldiers from the other side to sabotage the telephone lines by cutting them. In order to ensure that the most important news got through, writers got into the habit of putting the most important information first. So whenever you see films that are based on civil wars or even world wars for that matter, um, you see that the telegraphic format is used. And what you notice is the conciseness of, of that information. Um, 40 soldiers dead at X, or 40 paratroopers dead at X Valley, kindly send rescue team, or two ambulance needed, stop. So this is the information. That is how it is. So rest of the um, information might go in the second phase or third phase. So using that, I mean, little bit of a history to this is something that could be relevant. So today, inverted pyramid is one of the most popular format of writing news stories. In this structure, information is written in descending order, with the most important points appearing at the top of the article and the lesser news written in a shorter downward direction. So okay, consider this as a triangle which is put upside down. This is the pyramid structure, that of a triangle. If you consider that and put it um, invertly, invert that triangle, what you would get is the most crucial part of information must go in the um, lead or the most top part of the article, and subsequently the other information follows. And if there is a downward direction in which information flows. So ending at the fine point in the manner of a pyramid, which is turned upside down. So in a pyramid, the strongest, widest part is usually at the bottom, serving as the base for the rest of the shape. But in a news story, your strongest point is at the top or at the beginning, and this forms the basis for the rest of the articles. Are we clear so far?
Sir, I have a question.
Yeah, please go ahead.
Okay, so today, sir, in the other journalism class, we were doing a presentation on different news agencies,
Right.
and I was doing it on Associated Press. And so this was one thing that I had come across
Right.
where uh, a former AP president said that the inverted pyramid formula of writing is dead. He called it dead. Do you what do you think about that, and why do you think he said that?
No, that is because people are increasingly moving to the other formats or the other structures, which are the narrative style, and people want to know more information because they're increasingly using the most versatile format, so to say, which would be the web medium. Okay, he would have perhaps said that in the context of web, but in newspapers and magazines, we still, especially newspaper and television, we still follow the inverted pyramid style. So I don't completely agree in terms of putting out news in the mainstream media when we look at newspapers and television, where there is a space and time crunch. Um, we are pretty much following, irrespective of whether we are doing and publishing a newspaper from India or the US, they still follow the structure of inverted pyramid. I mean, as on today, if I have to say, we still follow the same format. What he's perhaps referential to is looking at the web medium, because it's not something that adheres to the structured space-bound stories. So where things can be expanded, because on the cloud there is as much space as we can demand, and there could be longer reads. I don't know if you would have come across when you are doing reading news stories on the web. Nowadays they say that a story is a 7-minute read or a 3-minute read or a 4-minute read, so that the readers are aware how much time exactly they're spending. Some stories could be longer format, like for example, where does a lot of interesting feature stories, investigative feature stories, where the reading can be relatively longer for 10 minutes or 12 minutes. 10 minutes and 12 minutes for a story in newspaper only be given to editorial or the op-ed pages where there are elongated features. Apart from that, if we are navigating through news stories primarily, it still follows the inverted pyramid structure. So I don't completely agree with him, but yeah, um, drawing from what he was suggesting, it could be possible in the context of new media.
Okay, sir.
In other words, you lead with your main ideas and the remaining paragraphs support and explain them, giving greater detail to the classic um, why the W questions. It is not only the writer that tends to rely on the structure of framing the article. Readers have come to expect it as well, realizing that the headlines of the stories will appear first and supporting details will be delivered in descending order, with the least valuable or necessary information in the final paragraph or paragraphs. So over a period of time, the readers are also used to this structure and format, that they have to have the most relevant information in the first two paragraphs. So even if they're skipping and moving on to the next story, they are not missing out on much information as far as that particular story is concerned. So you have the headline, you go to that headline, you have a lead and a body that mostly covers up what people have said. You have one or two quotes and you have the lead. So all the WH questions are mostly answered in the first two paragraphs. So in the subsequent paragraphs are detailed information. So if a reader is primarily interested in knowing more about the topic, he or she is going to go through that other details of that story. Otherwise, they can skip it and move on to the next stories. People who are habitual readers of newspapers or magazines still go on to give you a lot of details because they're feature bound. But if you look at newspaper, people who want to navigate through all the pages and know what is happening across the world, they might skip the third paragraph or the fourth paragraph and only stick to the first two paragraphs because they are they have trained themselves subconsciously to look for the information that are relevant or somehow necessary for that particular story. So that's how the skipping process happens. So it's not just from a uh, writer's point of view or a journalist's point of view that inverted pyramid makes sense. It's from the reader's point of view also, who wants to cover more number of topics within less span of time. And if you have enough time, and like I said, there are habitual readers, um, they might go to the entire newspaper and spend 2 hours of time reading through all the stories. Then have they can go through all the stories in all details. Okay. The next one is the narrative structure. So the narrative is storytelling. It is recounting an incident with the intent of touching the reader's heart. While it is not hard-hitting news, it is the path of most human interest stories and quite common in journalism. So you will come across human interest stories in newspapers as well as magazines, and magazines follow the narrative structure. The narrative takes the form of a story or a book writing in that it provides a beginning, middle, and end of a story. There is no inverted pyramid to be found in this writing structure, and there is greater license to use flowery language that reaches and influences the reader. So when we talk about flowery language, this is what I was referring to earlier, that you have the liberty to explore the literary language than sticking to the journalistic tonality. Okay, because the readers are in knowing that they want to know more about the story, so that they would want to read through the story by looking at the causality factor, by looking at what leads from one paragraph to another, or why the middle is connected to the beginning and the end in the most descriptive way as it could possibly be. A narrative helps the reader create a mental image of a story by describing the main character or the characters and incorporating dialogues and action. So it's pretty much like a film. It is not the proper format if you're trying to deliver information. If information delivery is your prime target or prime intent, then you need to follow um, the inverted pyramid structure. If you want to tell the story in the greatest possible fashion, then narrative is something that would help. Rather, it is a way to share with the readers an experience or event that an individual have endured with perhaps a lesson to be learned along the way. This is where human interest stories come handy, um, because it kind of gives you an account to account details of how a particular person's journey within a certain context of time uh, has unfolded. Um, it's hugely inspiring, many times allows you to kind of build a mental picture of that story or that individual. So human interest stories have been written on the struggles of the underdog, such as a youth who has lived through gang violence or a mother who returned to school to finish a degree so she could provide her children with a better way of life. There are simply no parameters to the human interest stories, and people tend to gravitate to them as readers because they're heartwarming and inspirational. And human interest stories are something that are increasingly needed as well at this juncture where we are increasingly becoming technocratic and kind of creating islands around us. Um, we have the world of information and the navigational interfaces and the pathways where we think that we are connected to the world through social media and so on and so forth. But many times we don't realize that subconsciously we are creating a boundary around us. And this is where human interest stories kind of collapses this physical as well as virtual structures that we create around us and then help us connect with people whom we don't know, people whose life stories could be interesting, people whose characters and abilities to endure and sustain through difficult times or odd um, living conditions could be extremely inspirational in nature. Next one would be the hourglass structure. The hourglass is not a commonly used organizational style in journalism. It's only reserved for writing longer stories such as feature articles for the Sunday edition, something that you would come across mostly in magazines or in newspapers. You would see that those kind of feature articles which get published in the Sunday edition of a newspaper that follows the hourglass structure. It begins by asking a broad question, then it narrows down by providing information such as facts and figures and observations, observation about the people, observation about their lifestyles and what opinions they want to share. And then the scope of the story broadens again by offering conclusions and generalizing back to the question. So an hourglass is something everybody has seen an hourglass. Okay, so an hourglass structure usually incorporates several journalistic style at the same time. Okay, it follows an inverted pyramid method and then expands, then again goes back to the same structure. So it it's a typical it follows a typical inverted pyramid and a pyramid structure as well. So firstly, you begin strongly with some questions and then mix and match with a more narrative way of trying to tell the story and then come back to the inverted pyramid style again to end. So the framework follows this sort of an order. You have a lead, then you have the most important facts that you want to share, followed by a transition, then more important facts, and then you conclude that story. Like an hourglass structure, it is weighed down in either ends. You can turn the story upside down and you would still have relevant information in this way or the other. Um, Journalists transition from different points within the story and offer you information which is spread across instead of being coagulated at one particular juncture. So to follow the hourglass structure, you need to navigate through the story. The basics of the hourglass structure would be like this, that you open with a lead that also summarizes where the article is headed, that what is it that is in offer for the readers, then develop the story using the facts in descending order of importance. Whatever information you have gathered, you have to put it in the descending order of importance. Then build in a transition halfway through the article. Okay. Then again continue the second half of the story with facts in a descending order of importance. Then draw to a conclusion that could lead back to the opening as to where it has started. Okay, so it follows multiple structures. It doesn't stick to one, which is something that gives you both, best of both the worlds. Um, it allows you to use interesting language because this is a long form article and readers are in knowing that this is a longer story, so that if somebody is interested to know the details of the topic of that person, they can move through event to event and account to account. The hourglass structure summarizes the news and then shifts to narrative form. The top of the hourglass provides the most important information, and then a transitional phrase of some sort is offered, telling the reader that the format is about to change to narrative form, and then this part can contain dialogues and details. When you say dialogues and details, it could be first-hand, uh, account of somebody whom you are directly quoting, where you are using direct quotes, or which can come as dialogues, or it could be some you are paraphrasing those details and information and putting out there. So it depends on how you want to tell that story. Sometimes it's in first person, you draw from them and then you're putting it, or you are putting it in a third person narrative where you are drawing from whatever they have spoken and putting it across. So the hourglass structure challenges the journalist to have greater command of writing. It requires the journalist to be able to compose hard-hitting news and narratives and blend them seamlessly for the reader's enjoyment. So you take up information which appears like hard news stories and then convert that into a narrative format by putting all the information together in this structure or format. Then the chronological pattern um, follows how the events would have occurred in the timeline. Words such as first, next, and finally are approached for this sort of a framework. A chronological structure has a place in journalism, but this is not the most popular as it would be in inverted pyramid. It is common where journalists explaining the order in which something occurred, such as a hurricane, tornado, earthquake, or cyclone, or any kind of natural weather event, where the writer deemed the most valuable way to relate the story as it unfolds or unfolded. The chronological order can be used in reverse order as well, that you can begin from the beginning or you can begin from the end. Now, the end would be, for example, I'll give you one example so it'll be easier for you to understand. Like Nivar, you have heard of the Nivar cyclone. Now, Nivar cyclone, when the news started coming up, um, what happened is you got to know that okay, the super cyclone is about to come and IMD has given us information and then we need to be prepared, so on and so forth. And then later you got to know that okay, the cyclone has dissipated somehow, and then it has weakened, the force of the storm has weakened. So now we know that there is no um, life-threatening damage, so to say. Wall breakages here and there, and trees uprooted and all, but there is no loss of life. So this at this juncture, that is the most crucial information. That this is the current status. So do you want to begin with the current status and trace back where this would have possibly happened, or you want to give an account to account details of how that has unfolded. So chronological order could follow the beginning, middle, and end, or the end, middle, beginning, depending on how you want to put it. Remember, the audience or the readers or the viewers are interested in the most latest piece of information. So the latest piece of information could be, the end of a particular event. You can begin with that and trace things back. So when we say chronological order, it doesn't necessarily follow 1 to 10. It can be 10 to 1 as well. So 10 being the latest information. Um, so this is where the public is interested in knowing where it is. However, for the most part, journalists use the inverted pyramid as starting point of news writing. It is the most widely used one and expected by the reading public. So this is more or less what I wanted to talk or share about the structure and format of